it's really hard to keep track of what's in place and what's not in place. Like, can you imagine being a port tariff collector, CBP tariff collector right now? It's like from minute to minute.
Your chart on the wall.
Yeah. You're scratching things out.
Well, you got to check your social media feed before you start collecting. See what
Absolutely. Yes.
This is Impromptu from Washington Post Opinions, a show that brings you conversations about the news we wish we could stop thinking about. I'm Dana Milbank, and on this Taco Tuesday, we're checking in on President Trump's vaunted deal-making and whether his bluster will ever actually work. Markets are starting to call Trump's bluffs on tariffs. Much to the president's irritation, investors are using a phrase called taco. Trump always chickens out. He has already changed his mind on tariffs more than 20 times. And Trump's approach to negotiating peace deals around the world seems to be suffering from the same fate. Despite his repeated boast during the campaign that he would end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours, the fighting rages on. So is Trump's less than artful deal-making getting us anywhere? In Iran, in Gaza, in Ukraine, or in the American economy? And are all his threats just bluffs, or will he actually follow through on anything? I've negotiated a deal to bring in two of my shrewdest colleagues to dissect this.
I'm Catherine Rampell. I'm a columnist here at The Washington Post. I mostly write about economics and politics.
I'm Jim Geraghty. I'm a contributing columnist at The Washington Post and also the senior political correspondent of National Review, because that's what you call a political correspondent who gets old.
It's all relative here, Jim. Let's start by talking a little about the tariffs and the trade war. Now that this idea has taken hold that he always chickens out, can we all just ignore his threats and return to business as usual? Or is there still the risk of things going off the rails?
Wait, you ask that question as if we have not yet gone off the rails. I think we departed the rails months ago at this point. And certainly if you are a small business, there is nothing resembling business as usual right now, because from day to day, you don't know what the tariff rates are going to be. If you're trying to get orders from overseas, whether from China or anywhere else, there's going to be a lag between the time you place the order and when it arrives here at our ports. And the tariff rate could be literally any number by the time it arrives.
Pick a number.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was talking with a guy recently who runs a business that primarily sells artificial Christmas trees. And you would think, why do people care about Christmas trees right now? It's June. And I was talking with him in May or April, I think. But he has to order stuff way in advance. And he was like, when we placed our initial order, we were going to have a tariff of a couple million, and then it went up to 20 million, and then it went down to 2 million. Like, who knows what this amount could be? So it's very hard to budget. And it would not surprise me if there are a lot of container ships taking the long way round right now, hoping that they can arrive within one of those windows where Trump is feeling more generous and we only have 40% tariffs or whatever on Chinese goods.
One of the many problems with the Trump administration, particularly when you're trying to discuss the tariff rates, is that when you begin a sentence saying, right now the tariffs rate is, by the end of the sentence, it's changed. That's how quickly things are changing. So I really think the taco label is this double-edged sword, because as accurate as it is, one of the few advantages of Trump and what I would see as very erratic decision-making is that he can reverse himself pretty quickly when he finally recognizes he's made a mistake. The fact that there's now this label taco going around and this perception of Trump being a chicken who always talks tough and then backs down as soon as the consequences get big enough, there's like a non-zero chance this causes a second Great Depression. Because Trump could enact some really bad policy and everybody would say, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is a terrible policy. And it's like, well, if I back down, they'll say I'm chickening out again. So I'm going to stick with it, even though everybody says this is a terribly damaging policy.
That's exactly what I'm worried about, because there's nothing he hates as much as being called a chicken or, the notion that somebody's laughing at him. So I do wonder, is that why we're seeing some more aggressive talk, at least, towards China and the EU? Like, does this actually increase the risk of calamity?
I think it could, but I think the risk of calamity was pretty dang high before is part of the issue. It is true that if Trump thinks his manhood is insulted or he feels like he's being humiliated in some way, then he may act even more aggressively stupid than he might otherwise when it comes to tariffs or anything else. But I think he was being pretty aggressive before. So, on the margin, how much more risk does that add? I don't know. And, part of the reason he was changing his mind even before he was being mocked with this delicious sounding nickname of Taco Trump is that he himself also didn't really know what his objectives were, right? Is the objective to get other countries to reduce tariffs? Sometimes members of the administration say that. Sometimes they say, no, we are keeping our tariffs in place, whatever other countries do, because we need the revenue to pay for the big, beautiful bill tax cuts. Or maybe we need the tariffs to stay in place because that's the only way to get manufacturing reshored, which I don't think is going to work either, by the way. But whether or not people were mocking him for the back and forth, there was going to be these whipsawing changes in tariffs because all of his objectives, or many of his objectives, I should say, were at odds with one another. So depending on which one he was focused on a given day, he was going to change his mind. All of which is to say, I don't think the taco label helps anything, but we were up against a lot of risks before.
Right. And I think what you're saying is even if we accept the chicken out, that does not bring us back to any sort of an acceptable position.
Yeah.
It looked like the courts were going to save him from himself last week, although now it appears he has escaped that.
Yeah, I think that's basically true. And there are lots of different kinds of tariffs he could implement. Many of them, as I understand it, have legally tenuous justifications. But it's very confusing. I've been covering trade for a really long time, and I'm learning about, what's this Section 122 and like all of these new kinds of tariffs, some of which have never been used before. But I think they were going to find different ways to raise tariffs / cause uncertainty well before these rulings.
One of my favorite examples of the phenomenon Catherine was describing was the Sunday after the rollout of Liberation Day tariffs, where on Marita Bartiromo's Sunday program on Fox News, Peter Navarro is out there saying the best part about these tariffs is that they're not negotiable.
Yeah.
The whole point of this is in place and this is here to stay. You change the channel over to Meet the Press, and I believe it was Kevin Hassett was on there saying the best part about these tariffs is that they're negotiable. The goal is to get the tariffs down for everybody, So it's kind of choose your own adventure. The problem is that like at some point you have to decide what do you want the tariff levels to be. And I suppose the problem is not that Trump can't decide. It's that he keeps deciding new levels every couple of days. I believe the ones he had on the European Union were in place for a little bit more than 48 hours, which is way less than a Friedman unit and a little bit less than who was the guy who was White House Communications Director for 11 days?
Scaramucci.
Scaramucci. Yeah, it's really a fraction of a Scaramucci unit for perspective on how long.
And
those
technically, they were never in place, right? He was just threatening it for 2.5
exactly.
days.
On any given, yeah.
Let me just ask real quick on China, which is the biggest part. So where do you guys see this going now? So we had the truce. Now everybody's squabbling and blaming and finger pointing again. Are we not getting our rare metals for fighter jets and cars? What's the crystal ball say on this one?
Catherine, all yours.
I don't know. I wish I had a crystal ball on this. But, there is some truth to the fact that we need to be more strategic about our relationship with China, that maybe we don't want certain supply chains exclusively dependent on China's cooperation with providing them and selling them to us. But that sort of more strategic, narrower approach does not in any way resemble what we're actually doing with China. Like the whole reason people kept asking Donald Trump about dolls, or he kept bringing up dolls, I guess, was that we are also tariffing Barbie dolls and various other things. And again, this speaks to Trump and his aides' vague and sometimes self-contradictory set of priorities here. And if they can't really decide, it's really hard to see where all of this ends up because they are not prioritizing the things that most matter to our national security interest. And they also can't even decide, do we want to, quote unquote, decouple from China? Because right now our economies are still very integrated in terms of they sell us a lot of stuff, a lot of consumer goods primarily. Consumer goods and inputs for our companies, for manufacturers and others. And then they also sell us things that are maybe more sensitive for national security purposes or long-term economic security purposes like rare earths. And so, yeah, if they don't know what the objectives are, it's really hard to know how they achieve them.
Yeah, you can find free traders who are much more wary about our current trade relationship with China than with anybody else. And I think, particularly as Catherine mentioned, anything involved in procurement for the Pentagon, probably medicine and healthcare. It's a little unnerving to be dependent upon the Chinese for that. But if you wanted to strengthen your hand against China, well, then you probably wouldn't want to get into a trade war with, say, Japan or South Korea or Vietnam or Thailand or any of these other countries. And that's exactly the opposite. Like Liberation Day was declaring war against the whole wide world. And that's counterproductive if your objective is to make yourself economically as independent from China as possible. And also the question is, how many Americans are really clamoring to bring back the T-shirt trade? How many Americans are clamoring to bring back underwear or maybe Nike sneakers? Maybe not. Like, is it worth it if a pair of Nikes is $900? In the abstract, Americans love this idea of, I'm going to buy American. And then you find out exactly how much they're willing to pay to buy American. And usually it's a very small amount as well.
Yeah. And actually, to Jim's point on pharmaceuticals, we have threatened tariffs on pharmaceuticals from Europe. We get a lot of pharmaceuticals and inputs from lots of our friends in Europe, including, big blockbuster drugs like Ozempic from a company based in Denmark. So if, again, we're trying to disentangle ourselves from China on things that maybe are not strictly national security, but are in our own interest, like making sure Americans have access to critical prescription drugs, why are we cutting off our friends who could help supply those same inputs?
At the beginning of this trade war, I think it was Navarro or Lutnick was saying it's strategic ambiguity, but I think we've lost the strategic part, and now we're just in a big mess of ambiguity. All right, on that note, we do want to talk about the national security implications here right after this break. Welcome back. So let's talk about Trump's role in trying to end the various conflicts around the world, threatening to strike Iran or to abandon Ukraine. Has any of this given him leverage? Are we beholding the art of the deal, as certain Republican senators had said at one point, or are we in need of a new tactic? Give us the overview. Do you want to talk about that, Jim?
Well, sure. Obviously, this just past weekend, the country that famously Trump declared, "You don't have the cards," in the Oval Office to Zelensky. Turned out they had a really good card up their sleeve with this drone strike that destroyed apparently 41 Russian bombers. It was the best operational secrecy since the Dallas Mavericks traded Luka Doncic to the Lakers and surprised everybody. So one, you start to wonder, how much does the president actually understand the circumstances on the ground? We've not been helping the Ukrainians. They're desperate for Patriot missiles. And the president will fume about Zelensky. He got a dressing down in the Oval Office. And then every couple of months, we get a critical comment on Truth Social or in an interview. The president says, "I'm so mad at Putin." And also, but there's never any follow-on. Are we going to send more arms to the Ukrainians? Are we going to enact secondary sanctions on people who are dealing in Russian oil? Trump has periodically mentioned this. He just never gets around to it. And I think that was another big component on this.
I think he will in 2 weeks, right?
It's always 2 weeks away. It's always, one more Scaramucci unit. It's always 11 days away. So that is, to me, like the most prominent example of this, of Trump talking tough and then never having any follow-up to the action. You can make the argument our war against the Houthis, which was extensive and expensive, and no doubt did some damage to the Houthis. But basically, we ended it seemingly abruptly with a pinky promise from the Houthis that they're not going to attack U.S. ships again. Okay, we'll see if this holds. And then we have this, allegedly, there's an Iran deal in the works. It does not sound like it shuts down all uranium enrichment by the Iranians. It does not address their sponsorship of terror groups and their efforts to destabilize the rest of the Middle East. This was everything Trump was denouncing in the old Iran deal.
It sounds a lot like the old deal.
It's looking a bit like the replacement of NAFTA with USMCA, which was basically the same thing. So just deeply frustrating. And we'll see how things shake out. But it does feel like there's this recurring pattern. Of course, now that, Trump knows that he's referred to as a chicken, he may call for a first strike on North Korea. Who knows what's going to come next?
Yeah. Or Greenland.
Or Canada.
Yeah, right. He's no chicken in Canada.
We have so many enemies now.
What do you think, Catherine?
My concern, besides the fact that, yes, in this case, Trump might take the bait and do, again, something aggressively stupid and maybe aggressively dangerous, is also that we have the additional complication of Trump looking out for Trump's own pocketbook. And I don't know how much that influences some of his thinking on these things, too. In the sense that, yes, he doesn't like being called chicken and Taco Trump and all of that, but he does really like $400 million jets and people buying his crypto meme coin. Well, first of all, none of us really know who's necessarily buying his meme coin and lining his pockets, perhaps in the hopes or promises of getting something in return. We don't know, but certainly there's the potential there. And then second of all, depending on who is making these purchases, what would they be asking for in exchange, and how much is that distorting the kinds of policy decisions and defense decisions that Jim is referring to?
Now, based on the way this discussion's been going, I suspect this may be the hardest question, but can we come up with cases where he's actually done some effective deal-making so far in these first 4 or 5 months?
He's gotten some hostages released.
Right.
You do wonder about what's been given or implied or promised or anything like that. By the way, regarding the various Trump organization projects all around the Middle East, you know who said that sounds corrupt? Tucker Carlson. So when even Tucker Carlson is starting to have doubts, that's when you know it really emits an odor.
And Laura Loomer, like when Laura Loomer is the voice of reason. We're not in a good situation.
So, you could point to a handful of, and again, I'm glad that he lowered the tariffs. The fact that he backs down can sometimes be advantageous.
Right.
And yeah, he does like to think of himself as a deal maker. Yeah. His idea of a deal, though, is a good headline. He clearly doesn't care about the details. I think we saw that in the renegotiation of NAFTA. Yeah. And as a result of that, you get this feeling of how many times are we going to get taken by the cleaners, because he really wants to have a big, happy press conference.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just the big headline. There's a lot of buildup, too, in the sense that every day it's like, there's a big deal coming tomorrow. Just stay tuned. It's like he knows how to promote a TV show. It's like LeBron James and The Decision. Every day. It's this lead up to, just wait, we're going to have 200 trade deals announced tomorrow. He cares so much more about the marketing in general and not so much about the substance of the thing that he is negotiating. Again, I mostly focus on economics, and it's really hard for me to think of an example of some great deal that he has made recently where we've gotten anything valuable in exchange. And right now, it seems like that deal making would be even more complicated, even if he were the most competent negotiator in the world, and I do not think he is, but because courts have been calling into question the legality of the bludgeon that he is using ostensibly to get concessions from our trading partners. Why would anybody grant him any of those concessions if they're like, well, his own courts are going to say he can't do these things that he's threatening us with?
I think it was just yesterday Trump was boasting that he had cut the trade deficit in half, which is true, except that he had doubled it in the previous 3 months. So.
Yeah, because everybody was trying to get in their orders before the tariffs went into effect.
Now he can declare success by getting it back to the status quo ante.
Well, that's his masterful skill, or his strategy anyway, which is always repackaging the status quo as a victory, even if, in fact, we are worse off than the prior status quo. Because, again, let's say all of the uncertainty goes away and whatnot. If we got back to where we were before January 19th, before Trump took office, we've now torched lots of relationships with our closest allies who we might need for other cooperation.
And, there's something to be said for the madman theory. If you never know what a guy is going to do, you might capitulate. But I'm wondering, what is that the reputation now, or has bluff been called so much? Where is American leverage and credibility right now?
I also think that if you're going to successfully deploy the madman theory, it helped if the madman is not actually such a madman and is posing as a madman.
You want them to think you're a madman, not actually be one.
Yes, yeah. When Trump expresses surprise to his advisors that Vladimir Putin and the Russian military are targeting Ukrainian civilians, we're in the fourth year of this war. Where has Trump been? And, you can hear in Trump, in a Time magazine interview, he said, I believe it was 53, something like that. The number of times he said he could end the war in a day. He said it in jest. Didn't look like he was joking on the campaign trail, but okay, fine. Look, every president has the presidential daily brief, the intelligence briefing, kind of tailored to the way. Bush liked to have somebody there to ask questions to. He'd like to have Tenet around to ask questions to. And, when Trump came into office, they had more graphics. Fine, that's fine. Apparently, Tulsi Gabbard, one of the ideas they're looking at is trying to make it look and sound like a Fox News broadcast. Apparently, that's what the president is used to paying attention to. And I found a 2018 Post article that said Trump does not read the president's daily briefing. He has only gotten, I think last time I checked, 13 intelligence briefings in person since the presidency, and he's now on day 130-something. It just doesn't feel like he knows what's going on. And it's, when he's like, well, what's up with Putin? He seems like he's going crazy. No, this is the same guy. This is not, this did not,
no change there.
It's not Jekyll and Hyde. You're not known ex-KGB officers for their warmth and kindness and empathy. And it's just kind of, so frustrating. So when they say the president could do anything, yes, it may well be because he doesn't know anything. And he's going into all of these decisions largely blind, or having, whatever he saw on Fox News Cryons or One American News or whatever Loomer whispered to his ear.
I'm hoping it has more cartoons.
My attitude is, if that's what it takes to get information into his noggin, go for it. God bless you, Tulsi Gabbard. Godspeed.
Yeah.
Right. Bring in Pete Hegseth, put him on the couch. It'll be fine. All right. With that, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you both for joining this episode of Impromptu.
Thanks, Dana.
Thank you, Dana.
This episode was produced by Hadley Robinson and Regina DeHeer, edited by Damir Marusic, Chris Solentrop, and Allison Michaels, and mixed by Emma Munger. Special thanks to Millie Mitra and Deirdre Byrne. Thanks for listening to Impromptu. Please let us know what you think about Trump's deal-making or lack thereof. Send an email to impromptu@washpost.com. And remember, if you're enjoying the show, please follow Impromptu on your favorite podcast app.